Welcome to the Court of History. I'm Sean Wilentz with my co-host, Sidney Blumenthal. And we're going to be talking today about the economy. Sidney, I'm trying to figure out which of Donald Trump's lies about the economy is the biggest. There have been so many of them, like everything else, it's like a hose of lies about them. But what do you think? I mean, it's really been it's incredible, the cognitive dissonance between reality and Trump speak, particularly
Well,
on the economy.
yeah, there were a series of elections in disparate places around the country with Democratic candidates running on affordability. And they all won. And Trump then declared affordability to be a con and claimed every price is down, everything is way down, grocery prices, gas prices, prescription drug prices. He said prescription drug prices were down as much as 1,200%, which is, why not
Right.
go for
Right,
it?
right. The bigger the lie, as they say, the bigger the lie, the better it is. Uh, well, our whole state of the economy and a great deal more, Sidney, we have just the exact perfect guest to be with us today, and that is Paul Krugman. Paul is a distinguished professor of economics at the City University of New York Graduate Center. Before that, he taught at MIT and was for a long time my colleague at Princeton University, where I first got to know him. He is the Nobel Prize winner. It's the sole Nobel Prize winner in his year 2008, I believe. And he's a New York Times was a New York Times columnist for a very long time, which is where many of you first ran across him. With all of that there, I want to welcome you, Paul. It's a delight to have you on the Court of History.
That's good to be on. Fun stuff.
Yeah, fun stuff. So what do you think? I mean, sitting from where you are, I mean, it's not what's the biggest, but what's the most extraordinary?
Well, I think that saying to people, prices are way down, groceries are way down, when, everybody, every normal person, not including people like Trump, every normal person can see it, a couple of times a week at the grocery store that's not true. It's one thing. I mean, what you if you want to say, the Antifa riots are burning Portland to the ground. Well, people might believe that because they aren't
Yes.
in Portland. Um, and when you're saying bad things are happening to somebody you don't know, someplace you aren't, that might work and has worked quite a lot for Trump. But saying to people, those prices you see at, every day, every time you visit the supermarket are not actually rising, which is what you see, but they're actually falling. That's a whole other kind of lie. That's who are you going to believe, me or your own lying eyes? And
Exactly.
I don't think, even from Trump, I don't think we've seen this kind of thing before.
Yes. I did read somewhere that he was promising to lower the tariffs on groceries. Is that an accurate report? I mean,
I'm
really?
not sure it was groceries in particular. He did say something about, I think, coffee, which is among the more absurd tariffs, is that we have a 50% tariff on Brazil, which is where a lot of the coffee comes from, which is based upon nothing except the fact that he's pissed at Brazil for daring to actually put a former president who tried to overturn an election on trial and convicting him. Uh, and there's, you can't say that we're trying to develop the U.S. coffee industry because that
Right.
ain't
No.
going to happen. And so he's sort of talking about possibly rolling that back, and maybe, but the truth is, we do get some groceries from mostly from Mexico, but most of those are still coming in tariff free. So there's not much that he can do. Even if it's I'm going to stop doing the bad things I've been doing, and you should all be grateful. That's
Mhm.
not going to work for groceries.
No, it's not. So, I mean, let's go to tariffs for a second. Let's just talk
Yeah,
about it. I mean, that was the centerpiece of of the policy, apparently,
yeah.
with our friend, I forget his name, from UC Irvine, who was the great
Uh,
proponent of tariffs.
Peter Navarro,
Peter
amazing.
Navarro,
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
name, indeed, Peter Navarro. So, all right, so you've been writing about this obviously devastatingly over the months and beyond the months. What do you think? Where do we stand with that? What is going on with tariff policy?
Well, first of all, there's this question which is more a legal question than an economics one, although just by the nature of the things I've worked on over the course of my life, I have to know a little bit about the law here, which is that most of Trump's tariffs have been implemented. U.S. tariff laws gives the executive branch a lot of discretion. The president can, unlike most other things, the president can't impose temporary tariffs in many cases just on the basis of a ruling by by people who basically work for him that a tariff is justified under certain circumstances. Most of Trump's tariffs are being done with this International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which IEPA, or as everybody says, IEPA, but the and which is clearly, manifestly illegal. Where he, on the one hand, he's saying everything is great, things are terrific. On the other hand, he's saying, and we have an emergency that demands that I have these extraordinary powers. And it shouldn't be possible to do both of those. And there's also a narrower argument that this is, tariffs are, he keeps on talking about the revenue, and clearly collecting revenue is a congressional prerogative. So this thing, and there's a court that specializes in these things, and they took almost no time to say this is blatantly illegal. It's the Court of Trade. Then the appeals court heard that and agreed with the Court of Trade, but put a stay on reversing the tariffs until the Supreme Court heard it. The Supreme Court has now heard arguments, and what do I know? But people who listen to the oral arguments think it's now more likely than not that the Supreme Court will rule 70% of Trump's tariffs illegal. And, they've always been illegal, so the money should be refunded, which is one hell of a mess.
There you go. Even Justice Barrett even said that, if we strike this down, it's going to be one hell of a mess, right?
It's not quite as hard as you think, because we do know who actually wrote the checks, so it's mostly importing companies. And now how that ever gets back to consumers, I don't know. But so the first thing is the whole enterprise has been based. The other stuff is also actually clearly illegal. He's imposed tariffs, Section 232, national security. He's imposed Section 232 tariffs on bathroom vanities. Imagine that we get into a conflict with China and we're dependent upon imports for our bathroom vanities. So there's all of that, and then the whole thing. I have to say, the tariff thing has been just I can go on and on, but maybe the most important thing to say is, aside from the fact that it's hurting the U.S. economy, people tend to exaggerate the importance of protectionism. It's bad, but it's not usually as bad as people like to say. But everything Trump has done on trade involves violating international agreements, because that's the way we do tariff policy. We sign agreements with other countries, and then Congress votes them up or down. But those agreements very explicitly say the ground rules are you cannot just decide to raise your tariffs. And so what we've done is make it clear to the whole world that an agreement from the United States means nothing. We are not a trustworthy partner.
Right.
Yeah. How much, Paul, has he empowered China by allowing China new markets for exports as a result of his tariffs, and basically hurt the U.S.?
Well, I'm not sure these actually open new markets. The Chinese have been finding other markets, and also they are, to a certain extent, doing domestic stimulus to offset. What he has really done is he's inspired the Chinese to do something that they had the ability to do but were reluctant to do before, which is to wield their own baseball bat here, which is that they have a near monopoly on production of rare earths and magnets that involve rare earths, which are critical technologies in the 21st century. And they've imposed export controls to make it difficult for everything high tech in America to take place. And that's, once that box has been opened, everybody knows it's there. So he's basically, and he did kind of fold. He sharply cut tariffs on China.
Yeah.
Clearly, Chinese have made it really clear who has the upper hand here. Which that was, we could have argued that in the abstract before, but now we see it. So America is clearly weaker now than it was.
Yeah. What do you think is driving the increase in inflation? Trump says
Yeah.
inflation is going down. Is it tariffs? Is it? There's a whole other question of reducing our immigration to. I think it's going to be net negative.
Yeah,
And also, there's the big beautiful bill, which
Yes,
is
I wanted to talk about the big beautiful bill.
impinging.
yeah. So there has been. I mean, inflation is ticking up. It's not It's not spiking. Or we. The last report we had, it wasn't spiking, and we won't. Because of the shutdown and the way that Trump has chosen to handle the shutdown, we're actually going to have a black hole month in which we have no statistics ever. We will never know what happened.
Of course, right.
Um, but we're starting to see inflation has ticked up. It's not hyperinflation. It's not. It's three, maybe at this point a little bit above 3%, which is higher than it was when Trump came in, but not dramatically so. Um, but if you're looking at particular things, I mean, there's always a zillion special factors. But I would say that uh, the particularly on groceries, the biggest issue is immigration policy. Who do you think picks those crops? The wage labor force, as opposed to family farmers, but a lot of it is hired workers. Um, that force is overwhelmingly immigrant, and probably a majority of those immigrants are undocumented. Anyway, it doesn't matter, right? If you
Yeah,
have
it
brown
doesn't matter,
skin and you
right.
speak Spanish, that you get snatched up. Um, so this is a crippling blow directly to production. And who's going to pick? And we know that fruit has been left to rot in the fields in some places because they can't get the labor. So, boy, uh, and if we, there's all this debate about the H-1B visas for skilled workers, but in some ways, the most critical workers, immigrants in America, are the people picking our crops.
Right.
So ICE is really having a deleterious economic effect.
Yeah, I mean uh, some of it will be slower to be visible, but the two areas where immigrants are really critical are agriculture and construction. There's other stuff too, we're having a housing affordability crisis. Uh, ICE didn't cause it, but it's certainly making it worse because it's one of those things where it turns out that you need to delve in a little bit. The the guys in the construction company office are probably U.S. citizens, in fact, probably U.S. born. The guys on the roof doing stuff are probably immigrants and very likely undocumented. And anyway, anybody, I have highly educated, uh, um, foreign-born U.S. citizen friends who are um, uh, like they're working in venture capital, that kind of thing, and who are not white and have relatives with whom they speak Spanish, and they travel around with passport cards all the time because you never know whether they're going to get scooped up, and of course they know that even that might not protect them.
Right. I have workers. I know workers here who have been citizens for a very, very long time, who are very frightened. Talk about going out and being frightened about walking the streets. It's not because of Antifa. It's because of ICE.
Right.
That ICE is the threat to people. Very much so.
Yeah. I think everyone has anecdotal, evidence about this. I mean, just in my neighborhood in Washington, I've seen the ICE agents run up and down our commercial street, go in and out. And also, they recently stopped a woman at the gas station a couple blocks away, and she's of Hispanic descent, but she's a college-educated American citizen.
Right.
She was lucky she was carrying papers, and she said to them, "Why did you stop me?" And they said to her, "You don't look American."
Yep.
Right. That's what it's come to. Somebody, it was maybe you're saying, brought up the one big beautiful bill. and I wanted to talk a little bit about its economic impact on all of this, because it's, it was the central piece of legislation that he got through. And well, I mean, I just want to bring people up to date with what that could do and what it has done.
Okay, so the bill, it's fiscally irresponsible. It will increase. It's got some major tax cuts in there that will increase the deficit, and tariffs are not going to offset that. But it's also got significant spending cuts, which are brutal. I mean, trying to figure out the impact on GDP is probably, we're talking decimal points, but the impact on millions of people's lives, because there is really savage cuts to Medicaid and food stamps in there. That's where all of the alleged cost savings come from, which is, it's terrible. Terrible for the immediate suffering, terrible for the long run, because we know that children who grow up in dire poverty, surprise, they tend to have stunted development and tend to grow up into less productive citizens as adults. What's interesting is that they did backload those cuts. The big cuts come after the midterms, and they probably thought that they were sort of managing to keep this stuff out of the public's eye until they've managed to consolidate power or whatever. What they didn't somehow make any allowance for is that the subsidies, the enhanced subsidies for Obamacare, which are really critical to making health insurance affordable for about 22 million people, expire as of December 31st. And they didn't put in anything to keep them going for another year. So and that's what the shutdown, was fought over largely. But that means that drastic increases in health insurance premiums are hitting millions of people now, which was not part of the plan. My belief is that this is not some cunning strategy on their part. They just actually they have never understood how Obamacare works. There's nobody in the modern Republican Party who has any policy chops, who actually knows how stuff works. And so they just sort of stumbled into showing their true cruelty a year ahead of schedule.
What do you make of Trump is now saying we need to come up with instantly a substitute for Obamacare? It's like
Republicans have been at this for 15 years. Trump has been promising a far better plan personally for 9 years. And so, there's zero credibility on this stuff. And of course, people's health premiums they're getting the letters from their insurers now saying your premium is now up by $10,000 a year. Some people are getting hit that hard. And so now we're going to, from a standing start, develop a whole new system. Furthermore, if you actually start to think about what it takes, what people want is they want the most important. Sort of everything kind of starts from how do we make sure that people with pre-existing conditions can get coverage, and that's overwhelmingly popular. Everybody wants that, even a majority of Republicans. And if you say, well, one way to do that is to just have the government provide insurance, and we all, basically everybody I know thinks that if we could start it all over again, something like Medicare for all would be the way to go. But okay, you start from where you start. If you want to make private insurance cover people with pre-existing conditions and not have the thing just go into a death spiral where only sick people buy insurance, you can go through, what policies you need to make that. You start to work it through and figure out how to make it hang together. And you look at the bottom of your yellow legal pad, and you've just reinvented Obamacare. I mean, the system is set up the way it is because it's kind of the ineluctable destination of any attempt to provide the kind of coverage that America demands, while still relying mostly on private insurance companies.
Right.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Trump is begun his assault on the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
He's, manufactured this bogus indictment of Lisa Cook
Yeah.
on the board, and he's harassed Jerome Powell. He's looking forward to his leave
Yeah.
departure next year. What should we be worried about Trump and the Fed?
Okay. So the Fed, for the most part, the thing is, the Fed has kind of like one dial, which you can turn up or down. So it's not like some of the other things where he's doing, where he can. So uh, you only get disaster relief money if you're if you voted for me. This isn't one of those cases. The Fed either raises or lowers interest rates for everybody. So it's not that kind of problem. What it is, however, is um, the trouble with central banking is that it's actually too easy. That it's so, other policy, you have to draft legislation, you have to get it through Congress, all of that. Um, Even the Fed, uh, you know, juicing up the economy uh, because the president wants it, that takes basically a phone call to the open market desk in New York, and
Hmm.
they do it. So it's a frictionless thing, which means it can be very easily abused by politicians seeking short-term electoral advantage, or just politicians who are listening to crank economists, whatever. And what the whole world has kind of concluded is that um, the only way to make this, to avoid really bad outcomes, is to put some sand in the gears here, if you like, but mainly by making central banks technocratic institutions with substantial political independence. Not ultimately, because in the end they answer to elected officials, but not on their uh, once every 8 weeks interest rate decisions. Um, and when you don't do that, when the central bank becomes political, then the particularly under autocrats or wannabe autocrats, you tend to have disasters because the autocrats end up believing what they want to believe about monetary policy, and and the Argentina basically always, but the current poster child for that is Turkey, where
Mm,
President Erdogan is a Trump-like figure in a lot of ways,
yes, and very
uh,
much.
and
Yeah.
and got himself some people who told him that you can actually fight inflation by cutting interest rates, not raising them. Listened to them and only backed off once inflation hit 80%.
Mm. Yeah. So, what
I
do you
like the
think?
tariffs, though. Well, I just want to ask one more question about
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
court about this, or the law of this, because you all have to be lawyers these days too. Which is that, like the tariff question, this is before the Supreme Court. I mean, it's going to become a question about the Supreme Court, and they've done this weird thing where they say the Supreme Court is in the grip of the unitary, executive idea, and that's where they think they can just hire and fire anybody.
yeah.
But they made this one exception for the Fed, and do you think they can stand up? What do you think is going to go on legally with the
Damned
Fed?
if I know. I mean, it's the basis for the attempt to fire Lisa Cook was so transparently. I mean, it was clearly, even if it had been true that she'd committed mortgage fraud, that would have been completely not right. Right? That's not relevant to her role at the Fed, and it turns out she didn't. So they have absolutely nothing to. By the way, I'm friends with Lisa Cook, so full disclosure. But so that particular case is crazy, but how much pressure can be brought to bear? Will he's already managed to get somebody appointed to the Stephen Miron appointed to the Fed board while still being a member of the administration, which is totally breaching the walls that is supposed to be there. So what else can he get away with? And nobody knows. Uh, it's hard. I mean, even if he replaces the Fed chair, well, he will replace the Fed chair, and then this question is sort of will it be somebody bad or will it be somebody terrible? But the Fed chair is not a dictator within the Fed. It's the Open Market Committee that makes these decisions. So uh, I think it's more likely that we're just going to be seeing a kind of gradual erosion. That on monetary policy, the Fed is going to constantly err in the direction of what Trump wants rather than just wholesale. I could be wrong. You might, and I should just say, I said the Fed has one dial, but the Fed also does a lot of regulatory stuff. And what I'm hearing, and I do have sources in the Fed, is that the regulatory side has already been significantly corrupted. That there are people who are basically uh, um, dismantling a lot of stuff that
How dangerous is
that.
that, Paul?
What's
Yeah,
right?
how dangerous is it? How dangerous
Oh,
is it?
enormously. I mean, this is, one of the moments I recall in shame as I was sitting in some meeting, actually a meeting chaired by Paul Volcker, and he turned to me and said, "Krugman, why are you looking? You're looking kind of dreary there." I said, "Paul, I'm sitting in a with a bunch of men in suits talking about bank supervision, which sounds like is the most boring topic in the world, except that when it's done wrong, you get a complete financial blowout. So this stuff is actually potentially extremely dangerous."
Yeah. How big a bubble? Some people think we're in a bubble about AI and, you know, they're loaning money to each other. There's a kind of circular,
Yeah.
you know, um, movement of capital among all the top tech firms. What's your view? I don't
Okay.
have.
I think it probably is a bubble, although the best case against it being a bubble is that so many people are saying that it's a bubble. And
Mm.
shouldn't that be some kind of mean that people are being cautious? Except I'm not sure that it works that way. And the uh, the cash flow. Yeah, no, put it this way. Um, the stuff we're calling AI, which isn't really, but whatever that we're stuck with. Um, it's really impressive. A lot of problems that seem to be totally intractable, like getting computers to recognize images or respond to natural language. Suddenly are it's doable, but the uh, uh, but trying to tell a story in which this actually pays off financially for the hyperscalers, the companies that are putting tons and tons of money into this, uh, soon enough to justify the investment is really hard. And it does have this feeling that this is going to go bad. It it's a lot like um, in the late 90s, we talk about the dot coms, which were sometimes kind of funny, pets.com and all that, but the real thing was the telecoms, the companies investing tremendous amounts of money in putting in fiber optic cables, and which eventually became useful, but not only years later. And the thing about the all of the excess investment in tech in the late 90s was that the stuff lasted. The stuff was still there and usable,
Right.
5 years later. Um, um, the stuff that they're doing on these data centers that they're building will, if they go unused, which looks like a real possibility, and stand idle, um, physically they'll deteriorate, and more importantly, economically, a cutting edge chip from 2025 will be a piece of outmoded junk by 2030.
Mhm, mhm,
So this does not look like it looks like the chances that this will be a really big mistake are pretty
mhm,
high.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
The gamble is what you're saying.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's funny. People that I talk to say that the real parallel in many ways is not even the telecoms bubble of the 90s, but the shale bubble of around 10 years ago. where all of these companies, we know a lot of money was lost in shale, which is not to say that fracking isn't a technology that works, but it turns out that a well that you drill for shale, for gas, is not like a well that you drill, for conventional gas or oil, which gradually depreciates. Shale, it tends to be gone in 3 to 5 years. And that was not, the accounting was essentially fraudulent because it pretended that shale investments would depreciate only slowly. And so anyways, probably too much the economics in there, but this does, if the stuff turns out to really, really generate lots of revenue, um, maybe this makes sense, but more likely not. And we should not forget also that there's the Chinese are in this space too, and they're doing something very different. The Americans are all building these models of everything that are supposedly steps on the way to artificial general intelligence. And the Chinese are building smaller, more special purpose models that are much less, much cheaper to run, and appear for most practical purposes to be just as good. So this whole thing has the feeling of this hubris on the part of our big tech moguls, uh, who have enormous amounts of cash flow to play around with, except now they're so deep that they're having to go into debt to pay for this stuff.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. What you're describing is a picture of enormous cumulative stresses being put on the system.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the effect of all of this, over time?
Well, I mean, it all looks pretty bad, but exactly which way? Uh, uh, the Yeah, I can tell you multiple disaster stories. I can tell you a story of a full-on trade war, which we do not have. So far, other countries have not emulated the United States. But if we got into that could be really ugly in a way that much more so than what we've seen so far. I can tell you stories about a financial crisis brought on by lack of supervision. I can tell you stories about a runaway inflation brought on by politicization of the Fed. I can certainly tell you a story of a burst bubble. The U.S. economy would basically be in recession now if it wasn't for all of this AI investment. Um, I don't know which of those stories comes true and how quickly. My old teacher, Rudy Dornbush, is famous among economists for Dornbush's law, which is that the crisis always takes longer to happen than you can possibly imagine. And then when it comes, it happens faster than you can possibly imagine. And we're definitely in a Dornbush's law situation here, and I just don't know.
Yeah. What about the elimination of data? I mean, in October, we didn't get the job numbers. You were on the Council on Foreign Economic.
There is no BLS anymore, right? For all intents and purposes.
And they'll try to start it up again. Although, how much will they try to politicize it? And what we just had a kind of a dry run. There are other sources of data. There are people tracking prices by looking, by basically scraping the internet. There are people, there are employment agencies and payroll agencies that give us independent reads on jobs. But none of them has the comprehensiveness scope of the official statistics, because why would they? That's not. These are all kind of they're getting data kind of incidentally in the course of doing other stuff, and we've just kind of had a dry run for what it's like to fly without the official data, and it is not looking good. Those of us in this have been saying, I'm trying to read ADP or Indeed.com or the State Street Price Index, and better than nothing, but nobody has any real confidence that we're getting a good picture of what's really happening. So, and this means that most immediately the Fed flies blind. But also, a lot of businesses, a lot of real world private sector decisions end up being based. It's just like, actually, this was something I don't know that we're hearing about, but the uh, uh, forecasts from the agriculture department are pretty important to farmers. Uh,
Mm.
I don't think that we had. Well, no, that's where the National Weather Service continued to operate, although its workers were not being paid. But um, I, and of course, everything is political. If Trump fires BLS officials because he doesn't like a jobs report,
Right.
he'll fire weather service officials because he doesn't like their forecast, which he came close to doing. Remember the Sharpie incident?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember the Sharpie incident, right? Well, I mean, look, Sid began the broadcast, the podcast talking about the elections
Yeah.
and how, that candidates like, as in New Jersey, with Mikey Sherrill, who talked about affordability, actually won. Right?
Yeah.
Very well. So in looking forward to this, I'm not, we're not political consultants here, but I'm wondering, if there is a series of things that the Democrats ought to be thinking about just on the economy, that they should be talking about in terms of how to get out of this mess. I mean, if they were asking you about that, what would you say?
Okay. So I would probably do a kind of standing on different sides of the room to give different kinds of evaluations. In terms of actually addressing affordability, getting rid of these crazy tariffs that helps right away. Beyond that, the 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 main things you can do are relatively long term. I mean, the biggest single problem is that we just don't build enough, mostly houses, but just in general, and overruling, finding ways to blunt the impact of NIMBYism on housing and in general on construction would be the biggest single thing you can do. But that's, first of all, it's hard to do and it takes time. But that's kind of your substantive policy agenda would be very much around uh, let's build stuff again. Um, for political stuff, there um, most economists throw up their arms in horror if you talk about price controls, but um, they're not always bad, and they certainly can give you can be doing something, particularly if you're pointing to clearly egregious um, exercise of monopoly power. And John F. Kennedy, we gave a speech denouncing the steel companies for raising
Right.
prices,
Right.
and
Remember.
The economy of the 1960s was not driven into a depression because the president dared to mention the possibility of price controls. So
Mhm.
I would say that, and there are places where that might really make some sense. I mean, there are certainly antitrust. There are
Mhm.
real issues in multiple industries. Now, every card-carrying economist will say this can knock a few tenths of a percentage point off the inflation rate, maybe. Fair enough, but I think it's really important to be politically seen to be doing something,
Mhm.
and the tariffs can do a bit more than that, and um, uh, and then meanwhile try to actually get good, sound policies for affordability in the long term.
Mhm. 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 And what about tax policy? I think is that just a done deal or not?
Well, no, we're going to need, in the long run, people still buy U.S. bonds as if there's no risk that the U.S. will ever default.
Mhm.
But with our current levels of taxing and spending, uh, the uh, the U.S. position is not sustainable indefinitely.
Mhm.
We can't do this forever. Another one of those economist laws, Stein's law.
When
Uh,
do you sound the alarm bell on deficits? And what?
Well, that's the thing. It's it takes a very long time, right? Stein's law is if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. And the is, but advanced advanced economies with stable governments that and rule of law, and particularly if they borrow in their own currencies, which we do, are given an enormous amount of slack by markets. Japan uh, has gone for decades now with levels of debt where everybody was saying, "Oh, it can't possibly," but but nothing ever happened. And the question I would think is, does Mr. Market start to say, is America actually that kind of country? Because it sure doesn't look like it's a responsible country that can be counted on sooner or later to do what needs to be done to get its house in order. It looks like it's a country, with impassable partisan divide, where one side of that divide is stark raving mad. And so, but what will be the triggering event for that? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Sean, raises the question of, the democratic agenda, but what you're suggesting also, to me, also raises the question of the political factor as an economic one. So, what happens as we go into 2026 and Trump, as he is doing, tries to distort the elections, and subvert them essentially? And
Yeah.
what kind of economic factor is that in the global economy, and what's the signal it sends?
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've already sent some pretty bad signals, right? For the rest of the world, we're already a completely untrustworthy partner. Trump didn't even try to invent justifications for ripping up all of our international agreements. He just went ahead and did. So everybody in the world knows that uh, that. I mean, people sometimes calling Trump a mob boss, but my understanding is that mob bosses actually do tend to keep their word to other mob bosses, and Trump doesn't even do that. So, we've lost all credibility on that front. But domestically, it's a whole other level if um, if we really go authoritarian um, at home. Uh, Now, um, there's a lot of attempts. You look at history and try to figure out, and it is pretty clear that authoritarian regimes do, in the end, weaken their economies. That uh, investors won't invest because they're always afraid that they'll run afoul of the or that some politician wants to seize their assets on behalf of his family. That other countries don't want to invest in you because, again, God knows what you might do. And that's just and also just generally the quality of policymaking gets degraded when there's a strong man in charge and nobody dares to tell the strong man anything he doesn't want to hear. That tends to be a gradual erosion. Now, it's really hard. Now, the historical parallels are not great because most of basically every example I know of something like what they're trying to pull off, which is a legitimately elected government that then tries to convert that into a permanent into one party rule. Every case where that's happened was actually the economy was in lousy shape when they took power. So they had a kind of an extended period when things were getting better just because they had been so bad at the moment they took power. So that was true for Orban in Hungary. That was true for Putin. It was actually true for Hitler, who he came to power because his predecessor was fanatically devoted to maintaining the gold standard in the face of the Great Depression. So they were all able to preside over a period of improving economic performance. not really because they were good, but because they're things were so bad. Trump inherited a basically healthy economy, and
Yeah.
so that we don't know. It's really hard to come up with a historical precedent for where things go from now. I will say that again, if we think that really if the elections, the midterms will effectively be canceled, God knows. But these recent races, I'm following. G. Elliott Morris is doing a lot of poll
Yeah.
analysis. He has this amazing fact, which was that in last November, people voting who said that the economy was their biggest concern supported Trump by a 60-point margin. In the
Right.
gubernatorial elections a few weeks ago, people who said the economy was their biggest concern supported Democrats by a 30% margin.
Right.
A
Right.
90-point swing already.
Right. Right.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. I wanted to. We don't have much more time to go, but I did want to ask one question that's come up. People ask me this question all the time as an historian, which is, and actually Kamala Harris actually raised this question a little while ago, which she said she was surprised that the titans of industry would go along with Donald Trump, right? And that's a question that people keep asking, given all the economic disasters that you're talking about. How do you explain that? I mean, how do you explain just other than just fear or terror?
Well, I think a lot of it is fear. I mean, look, in some ways, if you're Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, in some ways, you're more vulnerable to Trump's whims than any of us are, right? His ability to ruin your business with regulatory decisions or procurement decisions, whatever, is actually very large. Um, Part of it probably also is that a lot of these guys are um, uh, they actually don't really like democracy.
Yeah.
Uh, if and they they may still. I think they're probably kind of in a sort of in between state where, on the one hand, they're terrified. On the other hand, they probably still think that all their money gives them the ability to control this, and which is wrong. I mean, this is the lesson of Putin is that the oligarchs thought they bought themselves a government, and it turns out that no, actually they belong to Putin, and those who disagreed had a habit of falling out of high windows. So this, but yeah, I mean, I have to say I'm a little surprised. I mean, even the Russians seem to have had more, oligarchs taking a stand than we do. Now most of them didn't last very long, but it's uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I will say, Paul, just as a observation, an observation that nothing gives the lie more to the tech libertarian fantasy
yeah,
than their own servility
Hmm.
to Trump and government. I mean, they look like the living representatives of the road to serfdom.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's right. Definitely,
Right. Right.
definitely. It's a. It was always. Look, I mean, Uh, I do think that somehow or other, the kind of tech bro uh,
Hmm.
uh, class is possibly the worst elite we've ever had in American history. I mean, the Gilded Age robber barons kind of look like pillars
Absolutely.
of principle relative to these guys. And
I don't see any of them founding libraries like
I was going
Andrew
to say Carnegie Hall is not. You're not going to get Bezos Hall or anything like that. Yeah.
well, you actually have
University of
uh,
Chicago.
Musk going after attacking some of the widows and ex-spouses who have actually been spending some of their money on charity. How dare you be doing good works?
Yeah. Empathy
So
is evil. Empathy is evil. That's their.
empathy
That's
is
their.
evil,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we can. There are reasons for that. And I think part of the problem is that they made their money so fast, so easily, that they don't really. I think that is really destructive to the soul, and Yeah, it is. Uh, I don't know. The night before we recorded this, a bunch of captains of industry. Do we still say that? Captains of whatever it is they do.
Right.
Had dinner with Trump. I have to wonder. There must have been a pretty awkward dinner, given with all the Epstein stuff breaking loose as they were there.
Yeah.
But
You never know what's going to happen next. Yes.
Yeah, we won't ask what the menu was, but go
Not the
on.
menu. No,
yes,
nothing like that. No. Or the entertainment for that matter. Right. Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But it's no. It in general, we're seeing an interesting. I mean, you guys probably are better attuned to this than I am, but in general, we've been seeing the wealthy and many of our institutions are just folding or just with incredible speed, even as the general public is actually showing a lot more resistance, I think, than the script said they were going to. So how all of that plays out, I don't know. But
That's a really interesting idea, Paul, because these people like to think of themselves as the avatars of the future, but right now they're just lagging behind the general public.
yeah, and if I can start, that's probably too much to get into, but part of the problem is that these are the guys who were the avatars of the future. I think a lot of us, when 10, 12 years ago, a lot of these people were kind of pop rock stars, pop heroes. People thought that this technology and was bringing great stuff, and now they really are. Now it's all online gambling and
Yeah.
the word of the year I think last year was Cory Doctorow's and shitification.
Yeah.
All of these tech platforms have become so clearly exploitative that everybody sees it, and this angers the public, but it also makes rather than saying, "Have I done the wrong thing?" people like Zuckerberg or whatever, they just say, "Why the world is being unfair to me? I'm being badly treated." It's something like Trump. I'm being treated
Victim.
badly, and that's and that's part of why I think why they're going along with him. Aside from the fear and everything else, is that they share his resentment.
Yeah. Did I see somewhere that the guy who played Zuckerberg in an earlier movie will not play him anymore? Refuses to do so because of Zuckerberg's, the way he's turned. I may have read that wrong, but
I don't know. I think it would depend on the movie. I mean, the first movie, although there were some dark shades to it, that was basically a story of great stuff being accomplished.
That's what I'm saying.
Who now thinks of Facebook as a wonderful contribution to civilization?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, if Hollywood were not intimidated too, I mean, if it were making, say, a Bond sequel, who the villain would be.
Right. Yeah,
Bro, for sure.
Right.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, it's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean,
we're the villains of the future.
If Elon Musk isn't Ernst Stavro Blofeld, I don't know who is.
On that note, I want to thank you, Paul, for being a wonderful, entertaining, but also very informative guest. I know that our viewers are deeply appreciative. I know we are. So Thank you so very much. And
thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And so on behalf of my compadre, Sidney Blumenthal, don't forget to subscribe to Legal AF. And for now, the Court of History is adjourned.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.